The past is no longer here. Okay, so like right now, the past is totally gone. It doesn't exist right now. So it sounds kind of like some woo-woo spiritual statement, but it's just reality. Like the past seriously isn't here. So the past, the only place that the past exists is in our thoughts and in our subconsciously stored memories. And our subconscious mind stores every memory ever. We may not be able to consciously access every memory. Like I may not be able to say to you, okay, when you were 12 years old on your third day of school, what happened? Like you might go, I have no idea. But if you were under hypnosis, you would be able to, which is super interesting because you'll be able to shut off your conscious mind enough and access your subconscious, and you'll be able to access all the feelings that existed. So your subconscious is storing all of this, all the feelings that existed in that moment, in that day, and at 12 years old, third day of school. So your subconscious stores every memory ever, and it's colored with all of the emotion attached to the memory itself as well. So for example, again, if I were to say to you, let's see, if I were to say to you, tell me your happiest memory ever, you would tell me the memory and you would start smiling probably, or your body language would open up, or you'd shift and you'd feel the emotions connected to that memory because your subconscious holds on to it all. So this is actually how we bring our past from the past into our present. And this is also how triggering works. So because we store all of the emotion with all of the memories, when we have these patterns of painful experiences, like let's say mom and dad are super controlling. So let's say you feel trapped often or controlled or helpless. If this is happening so repetitively, you've got a lot of emotional storage around feeling out of control or feeling powerless or helpless. So when you're triggered, what's actually happening is, and you'll notice when you're triggered too, triggering is basically like the experience of something now that you are emotionally reacting to in a disproportionate manner. So let's say, you're, somebody pauses you when you're on your way out of work and they're like, hey, hold on, you forgot something, or come back here for a minute, you have to finish something. If that touches a whole bunch of stuff that you have emotional storage around from earlier experiences in your life and earlier memories in your life, then a trigger is actually you having an experience now where you're experiencing the emotion in this moment, which may be somebody like stopping you when you're on your way out of work, and let's say you're really excited to go home, might be like a 1 out of 10 of upset. But what happens is your subconscious is like this filing cabinet, and it goes, oh, this feeling, we know this feeling, and it pushes the rest of those stored experiences up to the conscious mind surface. So now you're experiencing feeling trapped right now, that the emotion of this moment when that happens to you, plus basically every other stored emotion of feeling trapped in the past all at the same time. So it's like you're experiencing the emotion of this moment plus all the other painful ones where you have emotional storage around. So when we do reprogramming work, what we are basically going to be doing is taking all that stored emotion, and if you can imagine that you're in a way like your subconscious mind is like a cup full of that stored emotion, we do reprogramming and we pour out the cup. And what you'll start noticing is later on, you can't get as triggered because your cup's a lot emptier. So you don't have as much to pull from and project onto. And so your triggers go down, you get triggered less often, those feelings start going away. They're very small if they come back, and they start to go away completely over time. Like you'll see that when you empty the cup, all these shifts start to happen. So we're basically in this state of like bringing our past pain into the present when we're triggered. And we're spending a lot of time throughout our lives basically repeating our belief patterns, our thought patterns, our emotional patterns, and even our self-sabotage patterns of behavior or unconscious actions on autopilot. Like you might even notice that when you're a child, maybe you would emotionally eat when you were a child, and you would eat lots of sugar and candy and it made you feel better. And then you might be noticing all like years and years later in your life, you still have that unconscious coping mechanism. So what we want to do is we want to start doing inventory. Like our first step to really healing this stuff is taking inventory of all of our belief patterns, our thought patterns, our emotional patterns, and our actions. So we can like isolate them and start working with all of them individually. So, because again, remember this too, because our reticular activating system, that mechanism in our brain, our RAS, keeps looking for proof for our beliefs and thoughts, it keeps like it's a filtering mechanism. We keep watering those seeds on autopilot too. Like we keep going and we've planted, let's pretend we planted the I am trapped seed because we felt that way when we were around mom and dad as children. And then our reticular activating system keeps looking and reprojecting that we're trapped, we could be trapped here, watch out, oh my gosh, this person's trapping you here. And we keep getting re-triggered, and the subconscious is programmed through that repetition plus emotion, which both are happening. We spend a lot of our lives hardwiring our programs further and further in. It's like we keep watering the seeds on autopilot. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you could externalize the way you speak to yourself on autopilot throughout the day. Imagine you could externalize it, like somebody else was speaking to you all day. And what you'll see is that it usually is kind of the voice of like your parents or somebody that really bothered you or traumatized you in childhood. Like the example I said earlier, like if mom was really critical and you were not good enough and you were bad, and you know, you'll still have a lot of those thoughts and beliefs that you're running on autopilot all day long. And so you really want to tune into that internal dialogue and start kind of breaking it up like scar tissue. Like, okay, wait, I am good enough, and here's why. Or if you make a mistake and you're like, oh my God, I'm so stupid, what's wrong with me? Hold on a second, like take it easy, right? And we want to come back to ourselves again and go, okay, no, human beings make mistakes. And part of, reprogramming is also like this sort of reparenting concept. And again, we're not doing this work today. We'll get into this next week. But part of working through a lot of this stuff is giving to ourselves what our parents did not give to us. So, ideally, you're never really speaking to yourself and your internal dialogue in a way that you wouldn't speak to a wounded child in pain. And that might sound funny, like, oh, I have to baby myself, but seriously, the fastest way to integrate and heal and reprogram, I guess reprogramming has other fast ways too, but one of the fastest ways to really integrate and be able to heal and feel whole and take even more responsibility and feel clearer and more empowered and energized in your life is to take full accountability for how you speak to yourself. Because remember we said the past is no longer here. We keep the past alive through our internal dialogue. Because remember, we keep reinforcing through repetition plus emotion those same patterns that we got from childhood. If we had a wound around not good enough, and we absolutely stopped telling ourselves that we are not good enough or anything related, oh, I'm not smart enough, I'm not successful enough, I'm not attractive enough. If we stopped doing all of those things, the program would go away in and of itself, because for a neural pathway to keep existing, it has to keep firing and wiring. Otherwise it atrophies and it dies out over time. So we'll get into this in more detail next week, but I want to make a really strong note here that says part of healing is being gentle to yourself and your internal dialogue, and noticing that we're actually keeping those really painful core beliefs very alive through the way that we speak to ourselves in our mind all day. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, because it's an important point. So now I'm going to go through and we're going to do a bit of a belief sweep, like an inventory. So remember we have this. I'm just going to open this a little bit. So remember we have this. We have like our BTEA, our beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and actions. So we want to be really clear about what ours are. So set a goal in each of the 7 areas of life. So pick physical, social, financial, career, family, mental, spiritual. And you can think of mental as mental, emotional, by the way. So pick a goal and just write them down. Something, it can be a big one or it can be a small one, doesn't really matter, whatever you really need. And then ask yourself, what's your but? So if I were to say, why haven't you done this or accomplished this already? You'll give me a list of reasons, and those reasons will be their own limiting beliefs that you have. They won't be your core beliefs, but they will be related to your core beliefs. So you might say, for example, and this is something I hear often, like let's say it's physical. Let's say my physical goal is to exercise more often. If I if somebody says to me, well, why aren't you exercising already? Why haven't you already been exercising? I might say, well, I don't have enough time. And that in and of itself is just a belief. It's just a block. It's that we're not making enough time, or we're not creating the pockets of time, or structuring our lives, or other things are taking precedence. Like, that's the truth. So your butts in relation to your goals is the first like general sweep of your life. You can do a first, and I'll hear, that's kind of like a very surface one, but I'll hear things like this. Like, let's say it's family. I want to make peace with my family, but my mother is way too difficult. I want to forgive my dad, but he did far too much. I want to, and the reality is that we just, all these things are going to show you the places that you're still blocking yourselves from full healing and accessing your full potential. So really good thing to go through and do the sweep here of all these areas and ask yourself, like, why have I not accomplished these things already? And you'll get that like response for some of your beliefs. The next thing, I would highly recommend that you take a lot of time here, because the more thoroughly you do this work, the more powerful it becomes for you. So I would take inventory and ask yourself, what are all of your stories about each of the following? Men, women, relationships, marriage, commitment, yourself, especially in a relationship. I said especially in a relationship for this course, because this is like to do with attachment styles and everything as well. Your needs in a relationship. I can't tell you how many people will come to me and say things like, if I express my needs too much, my partner will leave. Or, if I say too many things about my needs, I become too needy. Or some people just won't even really know what their needs are. So there's a lot of stuff that I find in there. Your partner, this is such a good one, because people over time, especially the longer you're with a person, remember, because the mind tends to hang on to negative more than positive over time. The mind has this tendency to, you can think of it this way, to build resentment, basically. It has a tendency to build resentment because over time we'll be like, my partner did this yesterday, and it can be like, took the dog out for too short of a time, or it can be the silliest little thing. But because your subconscious stores everything, and because it holds on to the negative more than positive, we kind of need to constantly check in using our conscious mind for our subconscious. I like to think of like self-work like going to the gym. Like, you can eat healthy and you can exercise and you can get to like your ideal state, but then if you just give up, your mind is kind of like always going to naturally work against your happiness. So you want to have like regular practices and habits at least once a week, once you're in a really healed space, to just keep checking in and seeing what's going on. And research also shows, this is Dr. John Gottman's research, research also shows that it takes between couples 5 positives to outweigh 1 negative experience we have with our partner. So if your partner criticizes you and it really hurts, if you don't do the work on it yourself and undo that patterning, or have a conversation about it, then it actually takes 5 positive things for you to come back into like an equilibrated state for the 1 negative thing that happened. So like, think of what that means. It basically means that like our relationships are on a track towards pain over time, unless we're getting really clear about the things that we're storing, and unless we're doing the proper self-work and work in the relationship dynamic itself. So, right, like, what are all my stories about my partner specifically? It could be that my partner is too rude, or too selfish, or is too needy, or takes advantage, or like whatever it is. Put that stuff on paper, do the work. I'm going to show you how to do all the repatterning in great detail next week. Your partner's needs. You might be like, my partner needs too much from me, or whatever it is. Write it all on paper. Vulnerability. I feel somebody was telling me this week that vulnerability, what was it? It was vulnerability equals pain. So, vulnerability is just a painful thing, period, and it's dangerous. That was the other thing they were saying. So write these things down. Figure out what's living inside of your subconscious mind. Again, remember, we see reality through this filter of the past. So we want to take this information, get really conscious about it, because what we're doing is we're getting conscious about the filter. What is your filter? What is the filter I see reality through? And once we see the filter and we recognize the filter exists, we can now clean the filter, and then like our view is squeaky clean again. It's like driving a car and you've got like your windshield and it's like getting all this muck on it and mud, and you're still trying to drive and get through life. And then finally somebody's like, hey, you have mud on your windshield. Use your windshield wipers. And all of a sudden you can see again, like a lot of your clarity and energy comes back again.
Thank you so much for watching. Again, please like, share, subscribe to this channel if you receive a lot of value, and please feel free to check anything out at www.personaldevelopmentschool.com. Thank you so much.